Hi everyone, and thanks for joining. In this deep dive, we're talking about a fundamental shift in how PaperCut MF handles the most critical part of the user journey, identity. If you've been following our Percolator program, you know that this is where we brew our most impactful innovations. For a long time, authentication in print environments has been a little fragmented. Users might have to log into the web interface one way, then find a different prompt for the desktop client, and perhaps another for print deploy. In a world where security standards like MFA and Zero Trust are the baseline, having siloed authentication just doesn't cut it anymore. We realised that to move forward, we needed to stop thinking about logons as a feature of each app and start thinking about PaperCut as a central authentication authority. So what does this actually mean? Well, we decided to take a two-pillar approach to modernising authentication in PaperCut MF. The first pillar of this modernisation is unified authentication. We've developed what we call the MF Authentication Hub. Architecturally, we're moving to a centralised identity provider model. Instead of every component like the admin portal or the user client trying to figure out who a user is on their own, they now point to this central hub. The hub acts as a proxy, handling the heavy lifting of security protocols. Once it's satisfied, it issues a unified trusted JSON web token, or JWT. Think of this JWT as a golden ticket. Once a user is authenticated by the hub, they carry that ticket with them. They can move from the user web portal to their desktop client without being asked for credentials a second time. It is true single sign-on across PaperCut MF. The second pillar is SAML2 support. This is what delivers the SSO user experience for organizations using cloud-based identity providers. By allowing PaperCut to act as the service provider, SAML2 provides the sought-after redirected logon experience. Whether your organization uses local Active Directory or providers like Okta, Enter ID, Ping Federate, or Jump Cloud, PaperCut MF now integrates seamlessly. When a login is requested, the user is redirected to your external IDP for a familiar authentication experience. Once they enter their corporate credentials, they're automatically routed back to PaperCut. It's secure, it's familiar, and it ensures your existing MFA policies are consistently enforced across every print login. So what does this look like for the sysadmin and end user? Let's head over to an end user workstation to remind ourselves of how authentication works today before we head on over to the PaperCut MF admin interface to see how we configure modern authentication in PaperCut MF. So here we are on our end user workstation with the user client where it prompts me to log in manually with my username and password. So I'm going to log in with my credentials. And then the user client allows me to go on to the PaperCut user portal. And again, I'm going to get prompted to authenticate again, even though I've just authenticated for the user client. So I'll enter my credentials. And here I am in the user client or the user web interface. And maybe I'm a teacher within the school, for example. So I'd also have a reason to maybe go to a release station interface. So if I enter the credentials for the release station interface, again, I'm going to get prompted or challenged to enter my credentials. And now I'm logged in here. Similarly, if I needed to access the web cashier web interface, I'm going to have the same challenge to prove who I am. So you can see this is a painful experience for an end user within the school, having to constantly re-enter the same credentials to authenticate themselves. And lastly, if a user is also using the print deploy client, if I go down to my system tray to install my new printers, and I go view my printers, I'm going to get challenged for authentication for print deploy. So I need to log in here as well. So that's how authentication works today. Now let's head on over into the PaperCut MF admin interface to configure the first of those two pillars of modern authentication for PaperCut MF, the unified authentication. So here we are in the PaperCut MF admin interface. So I'm going to head into the options menu and user and group sync. And I'll scroll down through my sync source, which I've already got configured. And we'll see there's a new option called Unified Authentication, which is a simple checkbox. So I'm going to tick that box and hit the Apply button at the bottom. If we then head back over to the user workstation, we'll see now with the PaperCut user client, we have a slightly different login screen, which invites you to open up a web browser page to authenticate via a web page. Click the button. So from here, I'm going to authenticate once. And that will log the user client in. If I then open the user client as I did before and click the details option to open the web user interface, I'm automatically logged in without being challenged for credentials. Similarly, if I try and access the Release Station Manager web page, again, I'm not challenged for authentication credentials. Web Cashier operates in exactly the same way. Even the Print Deploy client. So again, we have a slightly different login experience. I open the browser window, but as I've signed in once, it indicates I'm already signed in. Hey presto. So that's the first pillar for modern authentication for PaperCut MF. Now let's turn to the second pillar, which is the SAML2 support. For that, we'll head back over to the PaperCut admin interface. Within the Options and User Group Sync tab again, we scroll further down the page, past the Unified Authentication section, we'll find a new option for SSO single sign-on. And it's from here that we add the SAML2 credentials. So if I click the button, on this screen, I simply need to enter a display name and a name for the button that will appear to my end users. So in this example, I'm going to use Okta. So I'll call it Okta and I'll give it a button name of Okta SSO. We're then given the relevant SAML identity provider configuration URLs that we'll need to enter into our IDP, in this case Okta. So let's head on over to the Okta dashboard, where we'll use these SAML identity provider URLs to configure an application for SSO. I'm just going to log in. So here we are in the Okta dashboard. From the home screen, if I navigate to the applications area for the Okta configuration, I can create a new application for PaperCut MF for SAML2 authentication. So click the Create Integration button, select the SAML2 option, click Next. I'll give the application a name, so I'll keep it simple and call it PaperCut MF. Click Next. This is where I need the SAML URL information from PaperCut MF. So if I head back to the PaperCut MF admin interface, I'm going to copy the service provider ID and paste that into my Okta application. I then need the SSO URL, or the redirect that will take us back to the PaperCut after successful authentication. And those are the only two pieces of information that I need to enter as a minimum on this screen. Click Next. And then click Finish. So that's more or less the Okta configuration done. The one thing we do need to do on this side is to actually provision which users are able to access this application. So I'm going to go into Assignments. I'm going to assign to a group. Again, I'll keep it simple. I'll just assign it to all users in my Okta tenant. Click Done. And then if I click back on the Sign On menu, scroll down, there's a link here for SAML setup. If I click that, this will give me the three pieces of information that I need to enter into PaperCut MF. So the single sign-on URL and the identity provider issuer along with the certificate information. So I'll head back to the PaperCut admin interface and I'll copy the single sign-on URL first. And that goes into the SSO URL field. I'll then go and grab the entity ID. And then lastly, the certificate. And it's important here to make sure that we pick up the first and last line, so the begin certificate and the end certificate, as well as the actual certificate information itself. Copy that, paste that in. Now at this point, we could just move to the next section and click on the test configuration. However, something that we are looking to bring in the v26 release is metadata URL support. So rather than having to go and pull 3 pieces of information out of your IDP, for those IDPs that support it, you can simply enter a single URL. So if I click that option now, I get the IDP metadata URL option, and I'll head back into Okta, and we can see here that within my application that I created earlier, there is this metadata URL. So if I copy that, and then I paste that into this box, at this point I can then move down with my Okta configuration and hit the test configuration button. So that's tested successful in terms of the SAML2 connection between PaperCut MF and Okta. And I'm just going to enable this straight away. So leave the checkbox on yes, enable now, and click on the apply button. Okay, so that's the server-side configuration done for SAML2 support. Let's head back to the end user workstation now and see how the end user experience has changed. So as before, when we enabled the unified authentication, nothing really changes on the end user experience. We're still presented when we first log on and we've got the user client installed with the option to open a browser to authenticate. So if I click that open browser button, I'm going to get redirected to the central hub for authenticating. This time though, I have an Okta SSO button that now appears. And if I click on that button, it's going to redirect me to my Okta sign-on using the SAML2 protocol. I'm redirected back to PaperCut MF and logged in. And again, we can see that the user client is now authenticated. If I click on details to access the user web interface, I'm automatically logged in. Similarly with the release station, web cashier, and lastly, print deploy. As easy as that. So that's the first phase of modern authentication in PaperCut MF. To quickly recap what we've just seen, we started by enabling unified authentication under the user group sync tab, which creates a seamless centralized login flow across all of your web clients, PaperCut user client, and print deploy client. From there, we took the leap into SAML2 integration, linking PaperCut MF directly to Okta. By simply swapping identifiers and certificates, we've moved from legacy authentication to a modern bring your own identity model. So how does that benefit your customers? Well, it moves them away from legacy WebAuth into a secure, stable environment. Users get a familiar authentication button and a friendly browser-based prompt for both the PaperCut clients and web interfaces, with admins getting a single place to configure this. The best part, as I know you have customers desperate to get this set up, unified authentication and SAML2 is coming to PaperCut MF v26. Keep an eye out on the PaperCut partner portal for when you can get access. It's time to move toward a more secure, unified future. I'm really excited about this and I hope you are. Thanks for joining us.